What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the J Area Podcast. My name is Jose Ramos Jr., and on today's episode of the podcast, we will primarily be discussing NXT Battleground, my reactions to the matches, as well as predicting each outcome of each respective match. Now, NXT Battleground isn't the first of its kind. It's one of the few running PLE events that NXT has had in recent times. Of course, if you remember, Battleground was a pay-per-view event that the WWE would run for some years, actually. One of the most notable matches, at least that comes to my mind, was the Rhodes Brothers versus The Shield back in 2013, the original Battleground event. But given that there's a lot of interesting aspects revolving around NXT as of late, this one seems a little bit different. Obviously, it's on this coming up Sunday. A lot of people have been attracted to the idea of the AEW TNA presence in the WWE as of right now. Ethan Page, of course, recently signing with the WWE after spending several years with AEW, also appearing on the Ring of Honor brand. And of course, the current TNA Knockout Women's Champion, Jordynne Grace, now appearing regularly, practically, because this will be her fourth appearance on WWE TV since the Royal Rumble earlier this year. But a lot of speculation and a lot of intrigue. What I find the most intriguing, though, is this inclusion of the mid-card title in the women's division. It's something that fans have been clamoring for quite some time. I think now more than ever, there was a great opportunity to have a mid-card title for women's division, especially given that this NXT women's division is among one of the most deepest divisions in pro wrestling. You have a lot of young potential prospects that could lead the next wave of WWE superstars. Obviously, being that it's a ladder match, I do anticipate that it will be the opener. The WWE loves to start off their events with something exciting, something exhilarating, something that will stand out over the course of the match card. A ladder match is the perfect way to do it, and this ladder match has 6 individuals, 6 participants. Obviously, with Sol Ruca, we have Lash Legend, Jada Parker, you have Fallon Henley, Mia Yim, and Kehlani Jordan as well. All very viable prospects in terms of who can become the inaugural North American Women's Champion. The only thing is, I go about this in a process of elimination. You see, I believe each person does have pros and cons to becoming champion. But when I have to go through a process of elimination, the first one that I look at is Mia Yim. Mia Yim, already a part of the main roster, is an established star of the women's division. I don't see her coming out of this winning the title. I think this is just an opportunity to give her a little spotlight, something that she hasn't had on the main roster as of late. But given that she is a veteran, that she has that seasoned experience, it'll be nice to see her mix it up with the likes of a younger star, like a Jada Parker, like a Lash Legend. But I don't see Mia Yim emerging as the champion. For the same reasons why I don't see Sol Ruca emerging, because I think she's the heavy favorite. And rarely do we see the heavy favorite emerge as champion. She was ranked number 1 in the women's division during their little combine. And given the way that NXT ended with their segment, how she was standing tall against all her other opponents, rarely do we see that the individual who stands tall ends up winning it all. I don't think that's the case. I think Sol Ruca will have plenty of opportunities to earn this title, as well as other opportunities at other championships in her very young career. I do not see her winning this match at all, though. Fallon Henley recently turning heel. I don't see it. You know, maybe they want to pull something off here and give her a little bit of push, a little notoriety. But given how the story has been told, I don't see it happening. I really don't. Conversely, she's been kind of feuding with Kehlani Jordan. Kehlani Jordan is one of my favorites to win. But given that right now she's attached to Fallon Henley, I do anticipate those two preventing one another to win the match. I can see them feuding past NXT Battleground. I don't think Fallon Henley or Kehlani Jordan will win this match, which then leaves me with 2, Jada Parker and Lash Legend. These are the 2 that I think have the best chance of doing it. Jada Parker, still relatively young. You know, she's had this wave of momentum given her presence, given her persona. Could use a little bit more work in ring, but that'll come in time. And one thing that we have to give her credit for is for developing this persona, developing this character that we all can recognize. Although, like I said, she's not the best in ring, but you have this imposter syndrome where you can not only convince the audience, but convince yourself that, hey, I am that good. I do think Jada Parker, much like Sol Ruca, will have opportunities in the future to earn championships. I just don't think it's this one. I think Lash Legend, who has been a fixture of NXT for the last couple of years, especially under the Meta-4 stable, I think this is the time that they pull the trigger. Not only has she improved in ring, she's improved on the mic. Her presence alone has really established her as one of the stars in the division. And on top of that, when you have her rubbing against the likes of a Trick Williams on a regular basis, obviously the reports say that they're dating in real life, but on screen, when you have her in main event matches, you have her in main event stories, and she's become more of a presence, not only for being one of the members of the Meta-4, but for being a key fixture of the division. I think Lash Legend wins the title. I think we give her an opportunity to kind of branch out as a single star. I do think she still will be flanked by Shakara Jackson. Obviously, we'll still hang around Meta-4, but given that Oro Mensah and Noam Dar were taken out by Ethan Page, I think this is a good opportunity to have her see how she can handle it on her own as the main star. There was a time being where it was just her and Miss Jackson, but we haven't seen that for some time now. I'd be very much interested to see how they run this mid-card title. I think it should be a fantastic match. NXT usually has a great track record when it comes to these ladder matches, these multi-person ladder matches. So I do anticipate the crowd to get into it. I do anticipate the show to get off to a hot start when it comes to this ladder match. Next, we have the NXT Tag Team Championship, as we have Axiom and Nathan Frazer taking on the OC, Luke Gallows and Carl Anderson. To tell you the truth, I'm not really much feeling the tag team division in NXT right now. There was a time being where we had a long list of tag teams that were putting on great shows, great matches. And not to say that these four individuals can't have a great match, but it's just the story that they've been telling with them. It's something I don't really find myself all too fascinated with. I am a fan of each individual in ring, but when it comes to story-driven matches, especially with the WWE, who has found its fixture in having matches behind these stories, I don't know. I think for the time being, it's the same reason why I don't have Mia Yim winning. Luke Gallows and Carl Anderson don't necessarily need the tag team win. This is just a great opportunity to give Axiom and Nathan a shot at having a match with established veterans. I think they get their comeuppance, especially because how the OC has attacked them on several occasions. I think they retain the titles. I don't see the tag titles just changing hands just yet. I could see it happening with maybe like a Gallus, who just recently returned to NXT. At this point, I don't see it. I hope it's a great match, but like I said, the NXT division, in terms of its tag team, I think needs some improvement. I think they have had so much success when it comes to the North American title and the women's title that the tag team titles have been lacking. And speaking of the North American Championship, it is contested in a triple threat match, as Oba Femi will be defending it against Wes Lee as well as Joe Coffey. And like I mentioned, Gallus returning adds another level of depth to the roster, especially to this story. I think Oba Femi's run as the North American champion has been fantastic. He's very young. Obviously, just recently won the Breakout tournament. Wes Lee, regarded as one of the best North American champions in NXT history. And then you have someone like Coffey, who can have a brawl, who can have a match with anybody. I think it's going to be a fantastic match. It could have potential to be match of the night, but I do think the latter match will have something to say about that. As terms of my predictions, I look at each card, right? I look at each match card, and when there's multiple championship matches, I feel like you have to have at least one change hands. I feel like you need to have at least some kind of surprise. But I look at the list of matches, I look at the contenders, I look at the potential new champions, and this is one I cannot see changing hands. I think Oba Femi is still way too early into his reign. I think we have a lot more leeway, a lot more run time when it comes to his reign. I would very much like to see him versus Wes Lee one-on-one on a PLE, but obviously we have Coffey in this matchup. I think it'll be a great matchup. If I had to pick someone to defeat Obafemi, maybe Wesley, given that he's going through this comeback story after having an injury and having to win the championship that he never really lost. But for that time being, I think Obafemi. I can't see a world where he doesn't win this matchup. Now, of course, when it comes to triple threat matches, it's always a matter of, well, who takes the pin or who submits. Because there's always that chance that we want to protect someone. Gallus has recently returned, right? Coffee has announced his interest not only in the North American title, but the NXT Championship. So I do kind of see him challenging Trick Williams or Ethan Page, depending who wins that match, for the NXT title. I don't think they have him lose. But then on the flip side, you look at Wesley, who just recently returned as well. And I could see him furthering this feud with Obafemi. And that would be very difficult to see him take the loss. So it's a flip. It's a flip. I think in this case, with this triple threat match, I think Wesley takes the pin. I think it feeds more into the building of an underdog, gaining sympathy for the babyface. It only makes you want to root for him more to defeat this monster of a man, Obafemi. Coffee could take the pin, but I think they're still building something there when it comes to the main event scene. And Wesley, I think, can take this loss and not really lose momentum. So with that being said, I think Obafemi is the one to win the matchup by either pinning or submitting, more likely pinning Wesley. And I think that's something to look forward to. I always look forward to these multi-man matches, just as I would with any stipulation matches. And speaking of a stipulation match, we do have NXT Underground, as Shayna Baszler will be taking on her former protege, I suppose, with Lola Vice. They'd been teaming for quite some time there as they were feuding with Natalya and her protege, Carmen Petrovich. But being that, again, it's NXT, and this is the land where you want to be pushing your younger talent. You want to be giving them the opportunities to get these reps with established veterans and improve. You don't want to keep pushing these guys off to the side. You want to give them the opportunity to grow and get better. I don't know how, but I do think Lola Vice defeats Shayna Baszler, which is only interesting because she's currently in a tag team feud, her and Zoe Stark, against the likes of Jade Cargill, Bianca Belair, and apparently now Alba Fire and Isla Dawn, which potentially could be a triple threat match at the Clash at the Castle event. But when it comes to NXT, I think this is where we're going to start seeing a more fiery side to Lola Vice. Because if you remember, she initially came to NXT with Elektra Lopez as her manager of some sort, got rid of Elektra, and then got Shayna Baszler as like a trainer of sort, and now she's feuding with Shayna. I think this is the opportunity where Lola defeats Shayna. She earns enough momentum on her own, establishing herself as a single star, not needing a crutch, such as a valet or a manager or a trainer, and maybe builds up enough momentum again to go after that NXT Women's title. Or perhaps, of course, I'd be remiss not to mention the NXT Women's North American Championship. That's a possibility as well. It'll be very interesting to see, especially because we're having it in that new UFC arena, especially given it's an NXT Underground, so it has that MMA feel to it. And I think that's part of the reason why they're introducing this matchup, or not really introducing, but bringing him back for this event. Will it be a great match? Hey, I don't know. I'm always optimistic. I mean, I'm optimistic to see Booker T on commentary when it comes to Lola Vice, because that's always entertaining. But regardless of that, it's not the only women's matchup. Finally, number 3 out of 3 of the women's matchups, the NXT Women's Championship. Roxanne Perez, the reigning and defending champion, will come across maybe her biggest obstacle yet in TNA's Knockouts champion, Jordynne Grace. I still find myself struggling to find words, how to express, like, this is uncharted territory. It will be, like I said, her her fourth appearance on WWE TV. But now she's fighting for one of their world titles. Jordynne Grace, if you haven't seen her on TNA, is one of their premier stars. She's one of the faces. She is the Roxanne Perez, the Bianca Belair. She is the face of that division. I don't think there's any doubt about it. To see that opportunity that she has ahead of her to showcase her abilities, to showcase her talent on a much larger scale, with respect to TNA wrestling. But the WWE, everyone knows, is the major leagues. It's the big time. You want to set out to be a part of it. So to see her have this opportunity ahead of her, I would love to see them get 20 minutes, of just them two putting on a show, giving it all, giving it their best, because I know that those two are capable of doing so. This is a matchup that, quite frankly, could main event Battleground. I don't think it will. I think they will have Trick Williams versus Ethan Page as the main event, but one could make a serious argument that this should be the main event of the show. Obviously, because Jordynne Grace is a part of the TNA roster, I don't think she wins the matchup. I think WWE would be crazy to have a TNA wrestler win one of their titles. I think Roxanne Perez, especially because she's a heel, will find a way to escape with some kind of victory. Obviously, we know that Jordynne Grace is the powerhouse, much stronger than Roxanne Perez, but Roxanne Perez, I think, will establish a more cunning side of her. Again, like I said, escaping with the victory, whether it's by cheating or not. Maybe she hooks the ropes, maybe she has her foot on the ropes for leverage. I don't know. But I don't see them doing Roxanne Perez like that, having her lose the title to someone in a different company. Now, granted, against all odds, TNA's next major event is coming up. Potentially, is there an opportunity there for someone in NXT, maybe a Roxanne Perez, to make an appearance? It is a possibility. At this point, anything really is possible in the world of professional wrestling. It's a great time to be a wrestling fan. I keep saying that because it's true. I mean, when did you think we were going to have some kind of TNA WWE crossover? And that wouldn't be the only one, because the main event, seemingly, like I said, it should be the women, but the main event will more likely be Trick Williams defending his NXT title against Ethan Page. Ethan Page, who was, like I said, recently with AEW under their Ring of Honor brand, now in NXT, and the presentation they've had with him has been fantastic. They're treating him like a free agent, someone who's not even supposed to be there. He has a list of the demands that he wants fulfilled as a new member of the roster, one of those including a match against the NXT champion, Trick Williams. It's his first match. So with all that being said, I do think Trick Williams continues his reign. I don't see him losing the title. It's still, if you're a fan of the podcast, and if you listen to me often, you would know I'm very much of the mindset of title reigns. I don't think, in this day and age at least, the WWE is interested in flip-flopping and changing title reigns so quickly as they would back in the day. I remember I saw a tweet the other day where someone had made the note that in 2008 there were 8 world title changes, and that we should go back to doing that. Essentially, going back to the days when we would hot potato the championships and change them to just change them. And they argued that it was due to surprise factor. You want to keep wrestling fans invested. You want to keep them interested because anything could happen. And although I'm all for the notion of having these title changes like on a Monday Night Raw, like on a SmackDown, but not to do them ever so often because then they lose meaning. I do agree with the sense of having more surprises, but having title changes just for the sake of title changes, I think, damages the reputation of not only that individual, but essentially the title in itself. It becomes devalued. It becomes not as meaningful, I think. I think less is more. So given that Trick Williams, again, just recently won the title in April, it's to Ethan Page. And as I'm talking out loud, a lot of times you will see me start to talk out loud and see the wheels start to turn. Ethan Page is the newest signing. Are they going to have him lose in his very first matchup in NXT. Because in the past, what we've learned is it's kind of rare to have a new signing, a recently returned superstar, lose their first matchup. One of the biggest, most notable times that happened was in 2012 when Brock Lesnar returned, fought John Cena at the Extreme Rules event in Chicago, and lost. And everyone was just shocked that you would bring back Brock Lesnar and have him lose. Now, that's not to say I'm comparing Ethan Page to Brock Lesnar, but it's that mindset of why are we bringing you in to have this first match? Or why are we having you brought in to lose your first opportunity at an NXT Championship? Maybe as I sit here in front of you and you're listening to the podcast, maybe I might have convinced myself that Ethan Page could win the win the NXT Championship. I still think it's too early into the reign. I don't think Trick Williams loses. So definitively, I can't. It's a toss-up. It really is a toss-up at this rate. I think about the past NXT champions. Well, obviously, we have him, Trick Williams, Ilya Dragunov, Carmelo Hayes, Braun Breaker. Is Ethan Page going to be the next one in line? Because if you were to sit back and start fantasy booking this, you have Ethan Page, who is, it's well known he was with AEW. They almost acknowledged it. They practically acknowledged it on NXT TV. Jump over to NXT. He's challenging for this world title, right? Has a list of demands for Ava Raine to sign off on, which would include a NXT Championship matchup against Trick Williams at Battleground. You have this investment. They've already divulged in all this time. They've built him up as a star. They've really given Ethan Page the star treatment since arriving. It's only been 2 episodes of NXT. And the lack of build. We've only had really 1 week of build for Ethan Page versus Trick Williams. Maybe this isn't the first match. Or maybe this isn't the last match. Maybe it's the first of 2. But how do we get there? Now, if this wasn't the main event, and we had Jordynne Grace main event against Roxanne Perez, then you could get away with Ethan Page and Trick Williams fighting to a no contest, a double DQ. Because you don't want to end any premium live event like that. You don't want them to have some kind of DQ finish. You don't want to end a show like that. So what you could have is the women main event and have, obviously, Ethan Page and Trick Williams have some kind of screwy finish where it needs to be a rematch. Then you can definitively have Trick Williams win, or Ethan Page. Again, we're just fantasy booking here. If it is indeed the main event, you have to have a definitive winner. Unless it's like a heel win, right? It can't be a DQ or count out. It can't be that. Someone has to walk away as the winner. We have Trick Williams win. What's the incentive for a rematch? Maybe he had some kind of clause in the contract where if he doesn't win, he gets a rematch. Maybe. But then you move on, and I think naturally the next opponent would be Coffey, as I mentioned. Versus if you were to have Ethan Page win, you only had a week to build, right? Because he obviously had the attack 2 weeks ago. Then it's announced this week that he's getting a match. Okay. Trick Williams hasn't had that much time to prepare for an Ethan Page, who he didn't even know was on the roster a week ago. Ethan Page wins, giving that shock factor, and then having the opportunity to have a rematch. But then if you have Ethan Page win, do you have him have a short title reign just to lose it back to Trick Williams? And if it goes back to Trick Williams, then why even change hands? Why even have the title change hands? I'm going to definitively, after thinking out loud, deliberating with many of you, which I'm wondering if you had as many questions as I did. And if you didn't, you had like a clear-cut pick, good for you. But for me, sometimes it comes down to this point where I have to think out loud and think rationally. So with that being said, definitively, I am choosing Trick Williams to win this matchup. I think he retains the title. I find it so hard to believe that they take the title off of him. And even if they give it to Ethan Page, then what? Who takes on Ethan Page next? I think Trick Williams wins the matchup. Or at least leaves NXT Battleground as the NXT champion. Very much interested in how the event goes. I can't wait. NXT TV has arguably been one of the better shows in pro wrestling for me personally. There are some matches where I'm not as invested. Like I said, the tag team division isn't really at its best right now. But when it comes to these PLEs, they are consistent in terms of the production level, the match quality, and having you want to tune into the next NXT episode. So I'm looking forward to it. Like I said, I'm looking forward to the ladder match, the NXT Women's title, the triple threat match, and just based off of that conversation alone, the NXT Championship between Ethan Page and Trick Williams. So it should be a fun card, especially given that it's in the new, UFC arena, the Apex. Should be fun. I'm looking forward to it. Go ahead and drop down below in the comments what you guys think about these matches. Give me some of your predictions, as well as what are your thoughts on the potential of Ethan Page coming in and winning the NXT Championship in his very first matchup. But of course, I would be remiss to not mention AEW. On this week's AEW, we had an AEW World Championship matchup as Roderick Strong would challenge the champion Swerve Strickland in a fun matchup that would obviously see Swerve retain as they build towards his matchup against Will Ospreay at Forbidden Door, a matchup that a lot of people thought would take place at All In. And granted, it still could, but we're getting it a little bit earlier. I think AEW is in an interesting period right now. They're still figuring out their footing, especially given the whole Elite storyline. But the one thing that really grabbed my attention, and I watch AEW. I'm a fan of AEW. I won't lie to you. Obviously, I'm more inclined to watch the WWE. I grew up on it. But AEW is a nice little, palate cleanser when you want to watch something different. Still the same type of food, but just coming from a different source. One thing that really intrigued me was the return of MJF. MJF, I think, is the best that they have. I think he's their number one guy. He can't do anything wrong. As a heel, we found him to be entertaining, intriguing. So when they turned him babyface and teaming with Adam Cole, that's all he needed. He now has the rocket strapped to him. You can try to turn him heel, but it won't work. I think MJF he's set. The presentation that we saw in his promo against Roosh, that's the MJF I think we're going to be seeing for a long time. This cocky, snarky baby face who really reminds you, I guess, of The Rock, maybe. In those early days of the People's Champion, where he was just so entertaining in the way that he berated his opponents. He has this bravado, he has this brash cockiness about him that we admire. So I'd like to see what they do with him. I think this matchup with Roosh is a good warm-up. It's a good tune-up for him to return to form. But long-term, I don't care for Roosh. And that's no disrespect to him, but character-wise, I don't care for him. And that's one of the stark differences between AEW and WWE. I feel like WWE is more equipped, or I should say better equipped, to produce these stories that allow us to get invested in. That's not to say that AEW doesn't, because they do. I have become invested in the Adam Copeland story. Obviously, he's now injured. But given his story with Christian Cage, who I think Christian Cage is another guy who's one of the best that AEW has. The investment in a Swerve Strickland, in an MJF, guys like that. So it's there. Bryan Danielson is another one. Will Ospreay. So they are able to develop interest and intrigue when it comes to stars. But when someone is like Rush, who hasn't had that many matches on AEW TV this year, it's hard to believe him as a real threat to MJF. I think MJF wins in what would be competitive matchup because they like doing that. But MJF by far is the MVP of AEW. And with that being said, I said my 2 cents about AEW. I'm looking forward to Forbidden Door. We're going to be covering that towards the end of the month when it happens on June 30th, of course, a podcast episode where I share my predictions as well as a review of the event when that comes. But for the time being, this weekend, NXT Battleground, go ahead and check it out. Let me know what you guys think about each matchup. What do you think about the main event? Who will win the NXT versus TNA matchup between Jordynne Grace and Roxanne Perez? And join me again this upcoming Monday as I review NXT Battleground. Until then, my name is Jose Ramos Jr., and I will see you guys then.